Good afternoon, Bukky. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate the time you've taken in your weekend to be on my channel today.
No, thank you so much for having me on. I've really been looking forward to coming on. Apologies, first of all, I've had a bit of a cough, so if I'm a bit hoarse, then yeah, just bear with me. But yeah, like you said, my name is Bukky. I am a pharmacist. I live in the UK. I live in Kent, or the edge of London and Kent, I guess. And I've been registered for about 6 years, I think it's coming to now. Um, I'm currently working at the House of Commons Library as a public health policy specialist. So that's really been interesting. And I just took a bit of a detour from community, which was sort of a longer plan that I had. In terms of interesting facts about me, what's interesting? I write a little bit, I sing a little bit. I don't have a YouTube or anything. I'm not that good, but I enjoy doing it. So that's my sort of, downtime kind of thing to do.
So I'm gonna obviously your job title is already very interesting. I'm sure it's very eye-catching to many conventional pharmacists. So I'm gonna jump right in. So you went to pharmacy school and everything. Was there any background to you doing that, in the sense that did you always know you wanted to be a pharmacist? Do you have any pharmacists in your family? Was there any particular reason why you chose pharmacy? What was your motivation?
I didn't grow up planning to be a pharmacist. I'm Nigerian by background, so right from the get-go, my parents were like doctor, lawyer, pharmacist, engineer, typical sort of setup. But my parents were good in the sense that they guided me towards what they saw as more sensible and more reliable career options, but they were very happy to let me do what I wanted. And at some point I wanted to do English, psychology. I really wanted to do law at some point. My mum's like, you argue way too much already, you become a lawyer, we're not going to be able to talk to you. So that went out of the window. And pharmacy really came about because I knew it was an option, and I did some work experience at an independent pharmacy for quite a while. Actually, I did a few Saturdays with them for some time, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I liked the mix of science and medicine, but also being able to talk to people and have a service-based workplace, if I can put it like that. So I really enjoyed that. So yeah, after a few weeks of doing that on a Saturday, I was quite happy to really go ahead and push forward with pharmacy. So and yeah, I think it served me well. I enjoy while I was in community, I genuinely enjoyed it. A lot of people find it boring. I didn't really find it boring. I think in the same hand, I like a lot of different things. So I almost feel like I could have studied anything or done any kind of job besides maths and physics, because I'm just not a numbers person. But yeah, I think pharmacy was the right choice for me. So when I finished pre-reg, I was a relief pharmacist with them for a few months. And then I took up a pharmacy manager post at a supermarket pharmacy. Mainly because I really wanted management experience. I thought it'd be quite good for my development and just learning and that kind of thing. And I did that for just under 2.5 years. I planned to be there for a year because I really just wanted the management experience. I mean, I was planning to go off into public health. It took a lot longer to get into public health than I would have liked. But it was a good 2.5 years, and it was a job that I think it was really challenging. If anyone's worked in community pharmacy, particularly management in the UK, they will know that it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And did you ever work in hospital? Did you ever do any hospital? Have you ever had a desire to do that, or? No.
So I did. I think I did about a week worth of placement during my undergrad, which I enjoyed, but I didn't. I think I was just so in the mix of community, and I just so enjoyed it. So I didn't really feel a big desire to go for hospital. I don't think I applied for any hospital pre-registration opportunities. I don't know. I've never really just had that affinity for it.
Yeah.
So no, I've not had any tangible experience in hospital. What I would say, I think I quite like about hospital is that you obviously use a lot more of your clinical knowledge, whereas community, you don't use as much of it if we're talking about it honestly. So I think that kind of feels like a bit of a shame. You study so long and so hard, you want to just
able to,
exactly. So I think that's probably the only thing I envied from my friends who were in hospital.
And I think that kind of helps to like segue into the next question. So one thing that I've been talking to all the previous I guess people that I've had on the channel about is the fact that I feel like as pharmacists we don't realize how many opportunities there are available. I think we are so kind of in this, hospital, pharma or community that we don't realize that I feel like university prepares us for other things, and that might mean that I guess you'll talk a bit about what you had to do to add to your skills, but that might mean like picking something that we already learned in pharmacy school and adding to that, whether that's through experience, whether that's through further education, and then giving yourself the opportunity to essentially, work elsewhere. The pharmacists who work for, consulting organizations, pharmacists who work for digital organizations, and they've, they're still using their health skill, but maybe they're doing extra courses, maybe they're going for extra experience, which is helping them to basically find their way into those jobs. So for you, you're in public health. How did you kind of segue into that? Like, what were the requirements? Did you have to do an extra course? Did you just like get experience?
No, it's a great question. And it's actually one I'm quite passionate about, because I think like you, going through the undergraduate course, it very much was community for most people, hospital for fewer people, and then the lucky 5 in your year would get an industry placement. I think the first thing that helped me was just a genuine interest. So right from the beginning of the course, we did a few modules that sort of related to public health, and I was like, wow, like what is this? I love this. Like this is my thing. And for me, it was just very much trying to stay within that world as much as I could as a student. So going to conferences really helped. I will shout out the King's Fund here because I think their work is fantastic. I rely on it a lot for my job now, but particularly because as a student and as a broke student, they had lots of conferences that were just really interesting to me, and I couldn't afford the day rates. Their conferences are quite expensive, and when I wrote them to say, I really love what you do, I'd like to come in, they would very frequently give me a concessionary place to be able to come in and attend. And I would really encourage people to do things like that, because even though you're going in as a student and perhaps with not very much knowledge or experience, you are sitting next to people who do have that knowledge and experience, and you get to rub shoulders and have conversations during the coffee breaks, and they just literally open your eyes to that world.
Just for people who don't know what the King's Fund is, so if you could explain what that is and how people can, I guess I'll put details in the box and stuff, but what is the King's Fund, and who can make use of it, basically?
Absolutely. So I should have mentioned, so the King's Fund is a public health think tank. They're established in the UK. They've been around for a long time, and they do a lot of research on public health services. Obviously in the UK, that's mainly the NHS. So with all the sort of public health developments, new legislations, new structural changes of NHS organisations, they will publish material on that to sort of educate and inform stakeholders or people who are just interested in things like that. Their conferences at the time were quite topical, depending on what was happening in that field at the time. So it was great to just come in and listen to different speakers from NHS organisations or different groups, different stakeholders that had something to say on what the changes were and what the government's policy on health was at the time. So they're a great resource for people who are interested, or people like myself in my current job where research is really important. So I'm not affiliated to them. It might sound like I am, but I really, really do like their work.
Who is it? Like, who can make you? Do you have to be a student? Could it just be anyone that can kind of call and say, "Oh, I'm interested in doing this"?
At the time, I don't think there was a formal policy on this, but a lot of organisations that hold conferences and things like that will often reserve a few what they call concessionary tickets for people in the situation that I was in, who couldn't afford to go or who couldn't otherwise afford to attend. Sometimes it's also possible to go in as a patient representative as well. So if you're on your, I can't remember what they're called now, but your patient groups within your communities and things like that, if you're representative, or if you volunteer with a health charity and things like that, you can quite often be granted tickets and things like that. My big thing really would just be ask. You know, the worst that you're going to get is a no, sorry, you can't do that. And I mean, obviously in my case, I was quite fortunate to be able to be granted that place.
So you have an interest, you want to go into this area, you start networking. Something that we talk about a lot on my channel is the power of networking. So how did that then get you into like the space of this is what I need to do next to be able to get more job opportunities?
So I think the most important thing you get is a sense of the sector that you're looking at. So, you know, going through pharmacy school, you learn about not discrete areas, but you learn about the sections of the system that are relevant to you. So you know how a community pharmacy runs, you know how its contracts are operated, you have a broad sense of how hospitals work, maybe a little bit of an indication of how industry works, but you don't necessarily get that sort of bird's eye view of the other organisations that play into that system. So without my sort of interest and my looking around, I wouldn't know that there are bodies like think tanks who have health focus. So even in terms of looking for jobs and things like that, if you don't know that something exists or you know that an organisation does certain things, you're never going to be able to get a job there because you just won't know to look, essentially. So networking has two purposes as I see it. So one is obviously making connections if you're lucky enough to bump into the right person who sets you off on your journey. But I think 99% of the value, for me at least, was just getting a broader sense of what the other opportunities were and seeing other groups and stakeholders that had a relevance to the area of work that I wanted to go into.
Did you then take any extra courses or did you do like an extra degree?
No. So I think the natural thing for me to have done would have been to take up a master's in public health. And I toyed with it for a long time, but essentially I just didn't really want to go back to school, to be really honest.
I feel you on that. What did I do? Even doing these Canadian exams, I was like, why? Like, yes. Like when it's not compulsory, you're like, why am I even? There were days I think the day before the exam, I was talking to one of my friends who was doing the exam as well, and I was like, I am actually just going to get on a flight and go home because nobody's actually asked me to do this. And I understand that feeling of like, I don't want to go back because I don't need to. And it's interesting because one of my friends always says to me, you know, I share my different passions of things that I'm interested in. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should take an extra course and do this. And she always says, actually, but can you get into that position without doing an extra course? And that's not to say that you shouldn't pursue it. I think there's always an opportunity when you're in the role to take on extra things. And, you know, if you want to do extra, like even for your continuous, you know, professional development, you want to continue learning, those opportunities present itself. But I think sometimes, especially in the medical field, we feel like we have to do something extra. I mean, yeah, there might be roles where you have to do a PMP or you have to do different things. Yes, that's definite. But at the same time, you might just be able to get a job and learn on the job and maybe get to a point where you're like, okay, maybe I might do a 3-month program.
Exactly that. I'm completely in line with what you said. And it's not to downplay the value of further study. You know, I think education is fantastic. And it's not that I believe, okay, if I was to take a master's in public health tomorrow, I think I would learn so much, despite the fact that I'm working in the field. You know, I don't pretend to know everything. I'm always going to learn something by studying more. But pharmacy was a really, really intense, you know, studying is an intense part of my life. And there just aren't many people that could pay me even to go back and study at the moment. Like it just takes so much out of you, and it's obviously a rewarding experience. I'm grateful for where I am now, but just like you said, if I can use other means to get where I want to get, then I'm going to use those means. And actually, that it kind of comes on to quite nicely what another point in that, because I didn't take any further training. An important part, I think, of diversifying out of your discipline is knowing how to make your experience relevant and accessible to people that are considering employing you. So when I applied for my current job, for example, I didn't have a master's of public health, which wasn't a requirement actually, but probably would have helped. But what I did have was my dissertation or my thesis, which was a year-long project looking into public health services in community pharmacy. So it was it's a huge project that I could really reliably demonstrate, look, I've got research skills, I understand how the wider healthcare system works, I understand what the challenges in healthcare are, I understand what the government's policies and ambitions are with respect to public health and things like that. And they're the same objectives essentially that I would take out of the Masters of Public Health, for example. So as I've said, it wasn't a requirement for my job, but the objectives out of that learning experience would have been the same as what I had gained from my thesis. And it was being able to present that thesis in a way that demonstrated that I actually do have the skills necessary, or at least a foundation, and at least something I could start with. There are other ways to certify your knowledge and experience. So I've just completed a practitioner course with the UK Public Health Register, and essentially it was preparing a portfolio of all of my completed work in public health, and using that as a way to gain accreditation to become a registered public health practitioner with the UK Register. And another way of doing that potentially might have been further study, but as I've explained, it's not something I want to do right now. So there are a few ways you can actually sort of retrospectively become accredited or qualified. And if, like me, you don't want to go into further study, then I would encourage people to look around for those kinds of opportunities, or at least study that sort of builds on your existing knowledge so that you're not starting at zero.
I think this is so exciting because in my head, I'm just thinking it's one of the things I've learned in my 2 years of being here is, as you said, being able to tailor your experience to what a specific job is looking for. So you use your dissertation. It could be, when you go to interviews, they always ask, oh, give us an example of when you've done so and so. And you could actually think back and use your experience. And one thing I've learned to do, and this might be a tip for anyone who's watching, looking through my resume and looking through the different places I've worked, and then also have my resume on one side, have the job description on another side, and then you get to see what is the job description, what are they asking for? Okay, what have I done in my previous roles that I can highlight, pinpoint those areas and say, actually, I've done this, which relates to this. I've done this. I have this skill, which relates to this. And I think sometimes we forget that, working as a pharmacist actually, again, as I said, gives you diverse skills. Yes, we focus on communication. We focus on things like empathy. We focus on multidisciplinary skills and working, but there's so much other stuff, I guess my next question is just in terms of getting a role with the House of Commons, how was that process? Did it take a long time? How did you even go about? Because I guess the next question people would ask is, where do I even find these jobs? Where do I, because I think when me and you spoke before, and this is something I found as well myself, the job title is not going to be pharmacist. So you have to broaden your job search. So how did you find this job basically, and was the process quite smooth? Was it tedious? Did you have to kind of connect with anyone? What was the process?
First of all, I completely resonate with what you're saying about job descriptions, because it sounds almost ridiculous to say it, but you have this desire about what kind of role you're looking for, but you don't know what it's called. And you go through uni and all you're looking at is pre-registration pharmacist or pharmacist jobs, and those are the only two terms you need to Google for about 3, 4, 5, 6 years of your life. When I started looking for jobs, it was exactly as you said. You can't Google pharmacist jobs and expect to find a role like this. So it was a long time of actually just playing around with Google and playing around with all of the job platforms and things like that. I got quite lucky to eventually narrow it down to public health policy, and that was how I found the role that I'm in at the moment. It definitely took a lot of trial and error. What I would encourage people to do is just have a very wide-ranging job search and just try and loosen up your search terms, because like you said, it won't necessarily say in your job title pharmacist, but it might say policy, it might say tech or health data and things like that. But yeah, I think it's one of the big problems we've got for pharmacists in the UK, because you're just not really showing that there is a diverse career field out there for you.
What advice or what encouragement would you give to somebody who's maybe trying to get into a position like yours?
It would really focus on, as I've sort of been preaching about throughout this whole interview, but just really trying to widen your network. So conferences, if you can, like go to them, speak to people at the conferences, just find out what other people are doing. LinkedIn, I think, is a fantastic resource. You can ask to connect with anybody, and I find that so helpful because it's a great way of seeing what other people with a similar career history are doing. You know, if I'm looking for that kind of inspiration, and also reach out to people as well. Like, you know, I've had the odd message from people just asking about my career history and things like that, and I'm always quite keen to share, because I had people help me on my journey, so if I can do the same, then I will. But I really think conversation is really important, and just as much as you can, being exposed to lots of different options. And in terms of job searching, just keep your search options wide and varied. The more you can do that, the more you're going to be exposed to. So, you know, even as crude as it sounds, but even just sometimes just have a look by, for example, location. You know, you want to be in a particular city, see what's out there. If it's by salary, just see what else is out there. Just browse, and just, you know, you don't know what you don't know, and you have to just, unfortunately, I guess, in our position, you have to just make the extra effort to see what the other options are out there.
So if people want to connect with you, what other ways they can reach you?
I think my LinkedIn is probably the best bet. It's Bukky Balogun. I'm sure it'll be in the video. I'm also on Twitter. I don't tweet a whole lot, I'll be very honest with you. I signal to help things on there, but that's at BR Balogun. And again, I'm sure that'll be in the link. And yeah, like, if anybody wants to connect with regards to what we talked about today, then I'd be more than happy to do that. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, the effort. I know that you have a busy schedule, and you know, it's been on this for a while. I just thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it, and I think what you're doing with your channel is fantastic.